I4cp Next Practices weekly call. Great to have so many returning names and faces, including some folks that we saw out at the conference last week in Scottsdale, Arizona. That will be our topic for today. For those of you just joining the call, again, welcome. Please open up the chat. Let us know where you're dialing in from. I noticed we had probably at least half of the different United States recognized. I didn't see anyone international yet dialed in today. So if you're particularly from outside the United States, let us know. We usually have a few folks from Canada, Europe, Asia, whatever the case may be. Again, welcome everyone. If you're not familiar with these Thursday calls, this is the Next Practice Weekly Call Series by i4cp. We are the Institute for Corporate Productivity. We're a human capital research firm. We discover the people practices that truly drive high performance in organizations. We're a member-based organization. You see here just a small sampling of our members, many of whom we were lucky enough to be with last week at the conference. You see really all industries represented here, large companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Accenture, and many others, as well as some smaller names that you might not be as familiar with. If you're interested in I4cp membership and would like to learn more, feel free to reach out to me or really anyone at I4cp after the call today, and we'd be happy to share more information. As I said, this is our Next Practices weekly call. We have these every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. My name is Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst here at I4cp, and I co-host most of these sessions. And this week, I'm delighted to be joined by Carrie Bevis, our Managing Director of Communities and Partnerships. Good morning, Carrie.
Good morning, Tom. Really excited to be here with you.
Yeah, this is a special one because while most weeks we have a guest, a human resources leader from one industry or another, speaking on usually a variety of topics over time. This week, since we just had our Next Practices Now conference last week, we're going to be walking through 10 takeaways from that event. Before we get to that, I just want to note some of the events we'll be having coming up. You see the dates there on the right. We had a bit of a scheduling shuffle, and we're delighted to say that next week we're going to be talking about a hot topic, AI, ChatGPT, and the future of work. That'll be an exciting conversation. And then one of our conference presenters, Rob Cross, along with his co-author, Karen Dillon, of their new book, The Microstress Effect. We're going to tease that up a little bit as one of our 10 takeaways today, but not go too much into it, not wanting to steal Rob's thunder on the 20th. So look forward to that one coming up as well. All right, I'm going to cut short the preamble, the welcomes that I usually do, the advertisements, and we're going to dive right in. One thing I want to note is that when we say 10 takeaways from this conference, these are not sort of the official takeaways that I4cp is putting out there. These are sort of Tom and Carrie's perspective. I'm the one that put together the slide, so anything that's obviously missing here, you can certainly blame me. I think everyone at the conference had far more than 10 important takeaways, and everyone's perspective as to what the most important 10 would be would, of course, vary from person to person. But with that caveat said, I think we've got a nice set of things to share with you today. First off, though, I want to walk through a few things besides the content, besides the great sessions and presentations that we had. First off, to know this was our biggest conference ever in terms of attendees. We had over 500 in-person attendees. You see the sort of breakdown. These are high-level HR leaders. Over 20% are CHROs or chief people officers. Over 50% are at least the heads of their HR function. So very different than a lot of other HR conferences that you maybe have been to or are familiar with. And then another indicator of how different our event is, we have no expo, we have no trade show, there are no vendors at the I4cp event either. Prior to the conference, we have our 6 high-level HR boards, the Chief HR Officer Board, the Chief Learning and Talent Officer Board, Chief Diversity Officer Board. You see all 6 of them here. They meet all day on the Monday prior to the conference, the day before the conference kicks off. You see the photos that we took. Not everyone's included in these photos. Some folks were off on calls or having a quick snack. But you see here the ones that we're able to gather for the photos, and they dove deep into a variety of topics specific to each of their functional areas. Also on that first day pre-conference, we have 2 workshops. We have a culture renovation workshop that was led by Jay Jamrog, and we had an adaptive teaming for hybrid work, a very timely topic. That one was led by Michael Arena. So lots of people attended those. Like a lot of other conferences, always great to have pre-con events. I see a couple of hands raised. Are those folks with questions, perhaps?
I think that's my fault, Tom. I wanted to see a raise of hands from the audience of how many attendees on this call were actually there. And if
Got
you're
it.
one of those people who raised your hands, please be active in the chat. We want to hear where you have some other big takeaways, or you just want to add on to something that we're sharing.
Thank you for that. Thanks for doing that, and lots of hands going up. So lots of people that were at the conference also on the call with us today. Thanks, Carrie. Just a couple of other things to note before we get into our key takeaways from the event. There was lots of opportunity, of course, for both group networking and one-on-one networking at the lunches. We had table rounds where people could gather by different topic areas. Some of our exchanges were represented this way, as well as some other topics that we don't yet have exchanges on. And then a new feature that we had this year was our Connection Cafe. You'll see the word next come up a lot because this was the Next Practices Now conference. So you see what we did there with that name. And this was a new feature where you use the conference mobile app, and then you could schedule time with other conference attendees or with i4cp staff to have one-on-one sort of private conversations at the table rounds that were set up. This was a great new feature. One of your team members, Kiara Nicholson, set this up. Anything you want to say about this? It was great to see how active it was.
Yeah, I love that each year at the conference, we have a little bit of room to experiment with something new. And what the community team really wanted to come across is that we have this amazing opportunity to come in person together once a year, and you're going to have a lot of spontaneous networking opportunities, but also we want to create opportunities for very intentional networking. So you can find those that share a similar job title or maybe in your function, and actually have a place just outside of the ballroom to be able to have some of those deeper one-on-one conversations. It really warmed my heart as lead of community here to see so much of that happen, if not inside, people taking advantage of the sunshine and doing it outside. But hopefully it's something that we'll build on next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a real winner, a great addition to the event. Something that we've been doing for many years now. In fact, this was our 10th annual Best Buddies Friendship Walk. For those of you that maybe aren't familiar with Best Buddies, Zeta has just put the link in the chat. Thank you as always, Zeta. This is an organization that helps people with intellectual disabilities find gainful employment. We've all heard the numbers of how low those percentages are, but it would be a lot lower without organizations like Best Buddies. They're really the leader in this space. And we do a friendship sort of charity contribution walk each year at the conference. And you see here the folks that got up bright and early. I think it was maybe 6 or 6:30 a.m. for this walk. And again, this is a tradition at the i4cp conference.
I see myself somewhere in that. And it is always the most heartwarming part of the conference for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing we always do at the conference is give out our Next Practice Awards. Here you see how we teed up these awards, and we're already asking for contributions for next year's conference, even though we just rolled off the 2023 event. Basically, if you're doing something interesting at your organization, if you're showing significant ROI from a program, an initiative, if you're breaking new ground or advancing your field, we want to hear about it. We had about a dozen finalists, far more that applied, of course, about a dozen finalists, and we revealed at the conference and then through press releases the 4 Next Practices Awards winners, which were PwC, Land O'Lakes, Dow, and Experian. It was great to see you up on stage, Carrie, along with our colleague Nina, giving out these awards.
Yeah, this was a highlight for me. We had more nominations and entries than we have any year in the past. There were so many great themes that came out, a lot of incredible initiatives on ERGs and DEI initiatives, but also flexible work and supporting people in frontline roles and in office jobs. So was thrilled to congratulate these 4. And also a lot of these people were on stage sharing just in other presentations that we brought up. So. Yes, and I know you're about to share about all of the other great members, thought leaders that we celebrated. I'll share while we're pulling the slides up that my background is actually an image from our awards after party. This is our champagne wall. So we really tried to make it very special because we know that these winners put in a lot of hard work into their initiatives over the years, because we're looking for them to demonstrate impact on those ideas as well. So we will be posting all of their case studies. We'll drop some links to those in the chat, I'm sure. And we'll also be rolling out all of the others that we've received over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and then lastly, we gave out 3 special awards, one to Gary Hamill, who gave one of the presentations at the event. Like Bev K last year, he was given an Industry Legend Award from i4cp. Brenda Suguru, who is the Chief Learning Officer at EY, was given the Board Member of the Year. I mentioned earlier what our board groups are all about. And then Christine Deputy was given a new award this year, the CHRO of the Year Award from Pinterest. She also has been a guest on this call series, so you can look that up on the archives and learn all about what they've done with their excellent programming at Pinterest.
I loved that moment. Kevin Oakes surprised her. So that was a truly beautiful moment to just see her, I think maybe even tear up a little bit on stage. And I've had a chance to go and visit their headquarters and see her work with her HR team, and it was truly well-deserved.
Yeah. Absolutely. As Kevin Oakes, our CEO, always likes to share, a lot of what goes on at this conference is not shared outside the conference. That's certainly true for the board meetings the day before the event, but even in terms of some of the presentations and so on. So there are some things, some of the private conversations, obviously, by HR leaders that we won't be sharing on this call or otherwise. We call that the cone of silence. If you remember this from the old Get Smart series, people literally didn't have cones like this to keep things private at the conference, but the concept is the same. And so with that, we are going to be sharing some of the key takeaways from the event, things that we feel like we are able to share with the broader public. So let's dive right in. Again, apologies for that earlier snafu, but great to see that we're back up close to 200 folks on the call. All right, so first off, culture, if there was one concept or one topic that sort of resonated throughout the entire event, I would say it's culture. And so much so that I heard a few folks wondering if HR at this point really just is people and culture. We've seen a transition in some ways. Oftentimes CHROs have been retitled Chief People Officers, so that's a trend that's been going on. And culture hits so many different aspects of an organization. We've done some major studies on it over the years, our culture renovation study that led to Kevin's book that you see there on the left. Critical study where only 15% of cultures that organization cultures that try to transform themselves, try to renovate, are actually successful. And then our new study, Culture Fitness, which I'll speak to again in just a moment. High performance organizations 6 times more likely to have fit cultures as opposed to toxic ones. Great new study that again you can download. Zeta will put the link to the brief that's available to everyone. Kevin had led off the conference with some of these points about what organizations that with toxic cultures are far more likely to struggle with. Senior leaders who don't trust their employees, the vice versa also being true, employees not trusting senior leaders. Leaders favoring on-site versus remote employees is more common in those with toxic cultures, and unsafe environments for expressing opinions and concerns. We had a great call on this new study back on February 16th, where Kevin and Catherine Brecken walked through some of the results. Catherine also gave a presentation on the results to sort of close out the conference last week. And the one slide that I'll share is sort of the key takeaway, which is the 7 habits of very healthy cultures. These slides, by the way, that we're sharing today will be available along with the recording of this call at our archive up at the i4cp website. So no need to madly take down notes from all of these takeaways from the event. But the 7 habits are more flexible work arrangements, having a more learning culture or learning mindset, having your organization's board that really cares about culture and is starting to ask for culture metrics, leaders that lead by example, leaders that are held accountable for employee outcomes, leaders regularly communicating the values of the organization and doing so through different modalities and in different ways, and then addressing poor behavior when it does arise. Carrie, just open question. What are your thoughts on culture and what you saw about that topic at the conference?
I think that if you're an i4cp member and you are in that group that has been trying to make the case for flexible work, you absolutely need to go to this study and pull out some of these things, because Catherine did an amazing job really weaving together the business case of why healthy cultures, flexible work arrangements, so many things you just listed correlate to high performance. And if you want to get nerdy with it, there's a lot you can dig into there.
Yeah, absolutely. Zeta has added some of that material out in the chat. We had other presentations that hit on culture, as I was alluding to. It really sort of permeated really the entire event. One was Joe Whittinghill from Microsoft, but I can't really highlight everything in a 1-hour presentation here. So what I wanted to highlight was Anna White, the Chief People Officer at F5, who spoke to their culture renovation work. She shared these two sets of principles, the BF5 cultural behaviors and the Lead F5 leadership principles. Solid group of new principles that they came up with. And the point I wanted to make here, they didn't just come up with this overnight. What she shared was that this was a multi-year process for coming up with these new principles to guide their organization moving forward. And then in particular, I wanted to share what the results have been. Now, this is just anecdotal. These are some of the open answer questions from their regular pulsing of their employees, but take a look at the difference between what their culture was like in 2017 versus what it's like now in 2022 and 2023. People saying I have low confidence in the leadership team versus the company-wide investment in culture really shining through. People saying F5 feels like it's in panic mode versus I feel like I belong and I'm appreciated and trusted here, and that F5 really walks the talk, so to speak. Even questions around our product lineup, cloud, why are we so far behind versus our innovation and future is exciting with a clear direction. Again, showing what Carrie noted, the direct through line from culture to performance and productivity.
And this is why they were the first ever recipient, I believe, of the Culture Renovation Award. So we also were able to give Anna White an award on stage after she shared this.
Yep. And I believe we've had Anna White on this call series before. We've done some case studies. So once again, particularly for i4cp members, just go out to the website, search on her name, and you'll be able to find more about their journey through culture renovation. All right, culture will continue to pop up on the rest of this call, but I wanted to move on now to a sort of second key takeaway, and that is beyond HR now having a seat finally over the past, say, decade or two at the C-suite. HR is now seen more and more as critical to the board, your organization's board of directors. In particular, we did a study that's shown here on the right, human capital data considerations for corporate board of directors. And we found in a survey, I believe that was conducted with a group of women that are on boards of directors. And we found that what directors find valuable but often aren't given in terms of metrics and measurements are the list of things you see here on the left. And top of that list, culture health. Some of the other metrics, maybe ones you would have expected to see, like internal movement rate, employee exit data, but interesting to see all of these different metrics that boards of directors haven't traditionally been given, but increasingly are being given more and more because they're asking for it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I think that some of the board presentation on that one was so interesting. And the thing that really stuck with me that I would take away if I was a CHRO or someone in the position of even putting together a presentation that you know will go to the board is that you can feel confident in what you know, and that you're often in the position of educating the board why culture is important, why they need to be looking at some of these statistics with you or KPIs with you, and not being afraid of sharing the parts, the tricky parts, the challenges you're facing, that you're on a journey.
We're showing here, we had two sessions that were on this topic. We had Michael Horn along with Mark Anglesian take the stage and discuss this kind of connection between HR people and the board. And then our own Kevin Martin, who I see is on the call here today. Kevin, could I ask that you come off mute and maybe share just a couple of words? You had a conversation on stage with Kristen Robinson and Leah Sweet. Anything you'd like to share on this topic of HR and people's and culture's increasing importance for boards of directors?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And hi, Carrie. I think one of the big clarity points that they tried to get across was how HR really needs to contextualize the data so much more for the board. You know, in many instances, and we saw this in that research that we've done, Tom and Carrie, is that HR presents a lot of data to the board, but the data itself tells a very incomplete story. And so what's incumbent upon the CHRO is to be able to say, this is the human capital data we're sharing, And this is why it matters. This is how it links to the strategy, or this is why I'm emphasizing this at this juncture right here. And a good example, and I apologize, there's a vacuum in the background here. I didn't know I was going to be called off mute, but one of the examples they gave is how, so many, I think it's like 77% of board directors we surveyed, and we surveyed a lot of them, so that they get attrition data. But attrition data on its own, there's little value there. And what the real criticality there is, well, what is this, where is the attrition happening? What are the factors leading to it? What are we doing around it? So think leading indicators versus lagging indicators. So that's one of the big stories that came out there.
Yeah,
Thanks,
so
Tom.
important.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So important to be able to give context and insights and not just share sort of bare data with your board members. And no worries, Kevin, wasn't able to hear any vacuum. You must have one of those quiet ones. So that was the second takeaway that I wanted to share with you from the conference last week. The third, I'm just calling AI. It was everywhere. Certainly, it was part of the introductory remarks from Kevin Oakes to kick off the event, but it came up before that. It came up, frankly, at the board meetings. It was a hot topic, I know, at several of the board meetings on Monday. Obviously, ChatGPT is the generative AI tool that has gotten everyone's attention, everyone's imagination. Everyone has jumped to it because it's open and usable by all. But there are some others that we share at the conference that have also grown in popularity that do other things, creating images instead of text responses. You see Bard AI, which I believe is from Google, some of the other ones, and this is just a small sampling of all the AI tools. There's a massive amount of investment in this space that's going on, and it's something that we know that organizations are waking up to and getting serious about. We did a lot of poll questions at the conference, and you see here one of the results from the poll audience. Looks like we had about 100 respondents to this one that was live in the room. We asked, does your organization use ChatGPT or some sort of similar generative AI to automate some job roles yet? 10% said yes, 9% said no, not yet, but plan to soon. 74% said not discuss this yet. So we at i4cp are going to be on a mission to help you start discussing this. We've already had one Flash member call a month or so ago. We're going to have another one in early May. But before that, as I announced earlier, we're going to have a call in 2 weeks. I'm sorry, next week here at Next Practices Weekly Series, where we're going to be covering this topic and in particular looking at its impact for HR. So lots more to come on this topic because I know it's on a lot of minds of a lot of HR leaders. Wanted to share this quote from Sam Altman. He's the CEO of OpenAI. He wasn't at the conference, of course, but he said that what you see there on the top right, let society toy with ChatGPT now while the stakes are low, let people learn from it. So that's what we're going to be doing at i4cp, is helping all of you, both our member organizations and the broader HR public, to really delve into this in a responsible way. We did have a session on HR and using generative AI at the conference where Carrie and my colleagues, Judy Elbers and Molly Lombardi, helped folks walk through and just sort of kick off this conversation for a lot of folks. As we just saw on the last slide, most organizations haven't been delving into this yet. Not like you don't already have full plates with everything else going on. And yet this needs to be added to that plate. You see some of the areas of HR where AI is already making an impact. And as Judy says, and I don't know if this is a quote unique to her, or if she got this from someone else, but I attribute it to her. She said, you can't have a perspective on the future of work without, at this point, having a perspective on AI. And I completely agree with that. Carrie, what are your thoughts on this interesting topic that's arisen sort of suddenly?
I loved this session because something we did is we had conversations at our tables. And it really crystallized for me that across our audience, there was a wide array of perspectives on AI. Those that are already doing things with it, have been doing things with it for a long time and are ready for this new wave. Others that are nervous, and some of their younger, newer colleagues are kind of surprising them with deliverables where they have used ChatGPT and they're just learning about it now. So I think for anybody that is feeling new or a little bit nervous to ChatGPT, this conference was a huge wake-up call for me to start developing the skill of what Judy called prompt crafting.
Prompt
learn how to
crafting, right.
talk with these services. So if you're not the person to do that, I would look for somebody on your team to start developing those skills or understanding how other people in the org or industry are going to be using those skills.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, prompt crafting, because that is one of the things to better use something like ChatGPT and other tools like it effectively. And I'll note, I'm already seeing some people saying that they're being hired into organizations with roles where prompt crafting is part of the job description. I've seen 2 instances of that already in the past couple of weeks. So again, join us next week at the same time for the Next Practices Weekly call, because we're going to be joined by Judy and Molly, who you see here on the screen, and they're going to sort of walk through much of what they did at the conference and go beyond that, because this is something that we're extending our knowledge on a daily basis, it seems. All right, the next sort of takeaway that we wanted to highlight here on this call is in the area of DEI. Here's a result from our recent culture study. High-performance organizations are 38% more likely than low performers to see a commitment to diversity, inclusion, and belonging as an important element of their EVP in 2023 and going forward. DEI is something, again, that's grown in importance over the past several years, was always there, like AI and technology as well, on the radar for a lot of HR leaders, but it's really expanded, obviously, in recent years. We've had a lot of great calls in this call series since early 2020. So again, I would encourage you to go back through that archive. We've had a lot of great guests sharing what best and next practices they're pursuing at their organizations in this arena. One of the things that jumped out to me, and I believe it was F5, again, Anna White that maybe shared this, was they used the acronym IDEA, IDEA, to get the word allyship mixed in there with the I, the D, and the E. I was curious, we don't have a poll set up for this, but I'm curious in the chat, if your organization doesn't just use DEI or DE and I, sometimes there's an ampersand in there. If your organization uses a different acronym, I'd be curious to know what that is and maybe just a few words on why you think you're using something different. Sometimes a B is used in there for belonging. Just curious to get some feedback on that. I've seen A for accessibility. Thanks, John, for that. A lot of organizations have expanded it to DEIB to include belonging.
I love adding the word network in there every time.
Jedi, I like that one, being a Star Wars fan myself, to include justice.
Yeah.
Love it.
Values, vibe. Oh, that's a good one.
That's a good one. So vibe loses the sort of numeric one of diversity, but includes values, inclusion, belonging, and equity. I like that one as well. Interesting. Well, thanks for sharing those. We had an important guest, actually the first guest of the conference after Kevin's introductory remarks was Ellen McGirt, senior correspondent for Fortune. And she shared a lot of her own personal stories coming up as a journalist, with some battles she has faced. But 2 key takeaways for me was her ask of everyone in the room to defend DEI going forward, whether it's from political attacks or internal budget cuts. This is an area that's grown tremendously in the past few years. And when things grow fast, if a recession hits or budget contractions happen, sometimes the things that grew fast are the first things to be looked at and scrutinized. And she urged all of us not to do that. She said HR leaders really need to prepare to defend their DE&I programs to the company board, to their leadership, so that they can keep advancing on their results. And then the second key takeaway that I had was that trust is key, not only trust in HR and business leaders, but also trust specifically across the organization's values and the pay equity programs that they've put in place and so on. Any other takeaways for you, Carrie, across not just Ellen's session with Kevin on stage, but on this topic in general from last week?
You know, I really took this kind of feeling of a word of warning coming out of this. I think culture war was mentioned a couple times in conversations with Ellen. And I think within the i4cp community, within our membership, everybody understands the importance of these initiatives. And I think it was a reminder that even though we don't want to be in the position of continuing to defend them and build the business case, that may be the future, at least in the short term, that we're looking at, and just to continue coming ready with those stats, with those words, so that we can keep making progress.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And we did have a second sort of, in a way, DE&I focused session where our colleague Lori Likens, our VP of Research, sat down and interviewed Michelle Meyer-Ship, who has had a very interesting career. She joked that she was in the past the HR leader for Major League Baseball, and I believe she had some teenage or perhaps grown sons who wondered why she would ever leave such a position as head of HR at baseball. But she's now the CEO of Dress for Success Worldwide, a very interesting organization that helps women professionally network with each other, even as the name would suggest, help them with, acquiring clothing if they're lower income women professionals, business attire and so on. And she and Lori had a great conversation around gender inequality, not just in the United States, but on a more global scale. We just had Women's History Month recently, so it was well-timed conversation there as well. Any takeaways for you, Carrie, on the gender equality side from the conference?
I mean, I just really love hearing Lori talk about this. I mean, she's been writing in this field for so long, and it was really cool as a woman in the working world to hear from these two. And so just a more takeaway of feeling inspired by hearing their conversation and realizing how far this industry has come, but we've got a ways to go still.
Yeah, each year the numbers get revealed, and it seems like progress is far slower than it should be. And I'm glad you called out Lori's long history of writing in this area. She's long had a column here at i4cp called the She Suite. Sometimes I stumble over pronouncing that. A little bit of a tongue twister, but between her Twitter account and writing she's done focusing on this issue of gender inequality, I'd encourage everyone to check that out at our website. It's basically a filter on the articles, and check out Lori on Twitter as well. All right, the next key takeaway from the conference last week, at least according to Tom, if you will, is on the future being flexible, on the flexibility at work, hybrid work, remote work, return to office, all of those sort of bundle of topics, which we have spent a lot of time on our Next Practice Monthly and now Next Practice Weekly series. I love this cartoon that I forget if it was Kevin Oakes or someone else shared at the conference. I think it is true that years from now, we might look back on at least some of the things we're discussing and wonder why they were such big topics of dispute or discussion. Once again, we asked a poll question of the people in attendance there at the conference. Looks like we had maybe around 150 or so responses to this one. We asked, how many days are your employees required to be in the office? And the obvious implicit context there is for those that have a job that could be done remotely, not those that have to be on site. It was interesting that 29% actually said none. That they allow full flexibility, full remote for a good portion of their workers. You see 3% only requiring 1 day, 24% requiring 2 days, solid 35%, the largest response was 3. That does seem to be a common response for those that have a hybrid workforce. So that was some interesting data gathering from the participants at the conference. We then had a couple of sessions that really spoke to this whole notion of flexible and remote and hybrid work. The first was me. You see there on the stage interviewing Wendy Barnes, who is the Chief People Officer at GitLab. If you're not familiar with GitLab, they have been completely remote from the inception of the company almost 10 years ago, 2014. So not new to this world of remote work like so many other organizations for the past 3 years. They've got about 2,000 employees. They're spread across 60 countries. And because they've been completely remote for so long, they really have a very different approach, both in terms of their culture, but also in terms of just some very tactical and practice-oriented things. She described how they have a handbook-first approach to communication. And by handbook, she doesn't just mean like a typical HR handbook. She means a massive knowledge base. I think she said it was over 2,500 pages long. They do a lot of things where they asynchronously document decisions and practices and approaches, all sorts of information. They document it there first before it goes into Slack or Teams, before it goes into email. So a very different approach to knowledge management. They're a values-driven culture. She gave us the acronym they use, CREDIT, which I really like, which stands for collaboration, results, efficiency, DE&I, iteration, and transparency. And as I've noted on some calls at i4cp before, they've been very open about their remote culture and remote approach for many years now. And they've made available all of their tips and best and next practices in a remote playbook. So Zeta's already added that to the chat. Thanks again, Zeta, for doing that. I'd highly encourage you, as I did everyone at the conference last week, to download this guide because it really gives you a lot of in-depth knowledge that they've gained over the years.
Yeah. And, we have the Getting Hybrid Work monthly call series. We've been writing about flexible work for so long, but one thread that I wanted to pull through is how it connects to, oh, sorry, my screen went down for a second. I thought it was me all over again.
You're still
Is
here.
how it connects to so many of the other themes that we've been talking about, the importance of being able to hire a more diverse workforce if they can work from different places, the flexibility for people to take care of their personal well-being if they have that kind of flexibility. So I think being able to tie all those things together when you're making this move towards greater flexibility is key. Ooh, thank you for pulling this one up.
Yeah, this was the other key event that really hit on this topic head on, which was, again, Christine Deputy, our new CHRO of the year at i4cp. She's the CHRO at Pinterest. She talked a little bit about their PinFlex program, which, again, we've had her as a guest on this call series in the past, giving greater agency to help reduce stress levels. So again, speaks to well-being, which we'll see here in a moment, was another key takeaway at the event. They've tried to steer away from sort of labeling people into buckets like remote and hybrid to allow for ultimate flexibility. They even allow people to live in a different country entirely for up to 3 months of the year. They do still have quarterly in-person events. And of course, they try and encourage folks to come into the office where it makes sense, but to do so in a very intentional and purposeful way.
Yeah, I think that maybe when she's come and spoken to us in the past, we've had some really great conversations about why we're bringing people together and how we create that excitement, make it worth the commute to come in. And I also just really love that they're focused on not labeling people as remote hybrid, because I can play that forward into the future where we create all kinds of stereotypes around that.
Yeah, agreed. Let's keep that from happening as much as possible. So as I said, another sort of key takeaway from the event, like culture, like DE&I, like technology with AI, holistic well-being was really a common thread that went through many of the sessions that we held at the event last week. This slide we've shared on this call series many times. This is our study from a few years ago on next practices in holistic well-being, where we broke out well-being into 6 categories. Obviously, physical health has long been a focus of organizations. Mental and emotional health has become more important over the past 3 years than ever before. You see the other 4 there: financial, community, career, and social relational well-being as well. We've really touched on all of these over time. As I said, I'm not going to spend too much time on this now, because in 2 weeks' time, we've got Rob Cross and his co-author of his new book, The Microstress Effect. Rob and Karen Dillon will be joining us. His new book comes out on April 18th, so our session here at Next Practices Weekly will be well-timed for that. He did, as Rob always does, gave us a flood of great insights and information at the conference, and I'm sure he will do so on our call coming up. But this is an interesting angle on the whole broader topic of burnout, which itself is a key aspect of our mental and emotional health. Carrie, I know you've been a long-time colleague and friend of Rob. I'm sure you got a lot out of his presentation at the event last week.
Yeah, I do. I think some of my team realized, like, oh, the things that he was talking about on the stage are things that you do. And like, yeah, I really find all of his research so personally actionable. And one thing I love when Rob presents is that we usually have handouts or some type of tool for our audience to be able to self-reflect and then talk about some of the small tweaks that they want to make in their own life so that they too can live a more purposeful life. So it's hard for me to not say more, but I will try to keep it until we get to delve in a couple weeks.
Yeah, we're just teasing it up for a couple weeks from now, where I'm sure Rob will reprise what he did at the conference last week. For those that aren't familiar with the term microstress, I did just want to share what that means: moments of stress triggered by the people in our professional or personal lives that are so routine that we barely register them, but whose cumulative toll is debilitating. So much of Rob's research is like this. It's looking at little things that maybe we often ignore, whether it's microstress. In the past, it was collaborative overload, the way we onboard employees, things like that, but then really doing extensive research to find out just how much we can improve our lives. Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 30%, if we just change some of our day-to-day practices.
Exactly. The things that are invisible and normalized, that we actually have some agency to change if we start to recognize it.
The next sort of takeaway that we wanted to share with you from the event last week was all around talent. I'm referring to a sort of talent paradox here. A lot of organizations going through some layoffs, and yet I still sensed at the conference last week an almost desperation at times around hiring people with certain skills and certain roles. So that hasn't gone away. We might no longer be in a great resignation phase of the economy, might be tipping more towards cost consciousness and some degree of layoffs, and yet there's still a need to consider, do we have the right skills in the organization? We did a quick poll again of the audience that was there last week. Looks like for this one, we had close to 200 responses, and we asked, does your organization have a skills database? Now, we had previously learned that about 18% of organizations do have one, and as you see here, only 10% have one that covers all employees. And we got a pretty similar result from the folks at the conference last week, where 16% said yes, our organization does have a skills database. What was nice to see, though, was another 22% saying not yet, but we're currently building this out. That was heartening for me. I conducted a lot of interviews with HR leaders on this subject over the past couple of years, and that number wasn't as high as that, I would say, anecdotally from those interviews. So good to see that that is on the way. We had a panel with Jennifer Landis from Black Hills Corporation, Brenda Sugru from EY, and Kim Rose from Vertex Pharmaceuticals, where we talked all about this topic of skills data, skills taxonomies, talent mobility, and upskilling as well. You see here some of the key takeaways. A lot of organizations still facing a talent hoarding issue from some of their leaders, as opposed to seeing talent as a shared asset across the organization. You see some of the other challenges being resources, time, transparency of the talent mobility process. But these three HR leaders shared on the stage some great new practices. How to get the skills data from the employees in a way that makes them want to contribute it instead of being skeptical by maybe tying it into other initiatives. Here we see that through line with DE&I again. And then even for those organizations that maybe can't use one of the fancy talent marketplace platforms that have become very popular for larger organizations to roll out, there's still a lot that can be done to increase talent mobility, just by recognizing managers that do a good job of developing their people, doing that publicly in the organization, or even adjusting organizational structure. Jennifer Landis shared how in their company, being a bit of a different organization, more manufacturing focused than tech, they've actually adjusted their organizational structure to create some career pathways that didn't exist before, thereby increasing talent mobility where they could.
This was a very star-studded stage. I loved these three women interacting with you, Tom. And of course, Kim Rose at Vertex, they took home the award for High Performing Organization. Brenda took home the award for our Board Member of the Year. And then I think that Jennifer had some of the most authentic words to share that just really showed how CHROs and the work that so many of our members are doing are truly changing lives. And to see the talent marketplace look so different across three different kinds of workforces was just really cool. It brought it all to life for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it was my honor to be on the stage moderating that panel. Just noticed over in the chat a question from Julie Munsell. Have we done a webinar on internal talent mobility? We definitely have, spanning back a few years. For i4cp members, we've done several flash calls, so you can search for those recordings at our website. But we've also touched on this many times in this public call series on Thursdays and on the other days we used to hold them dating back to 2020. So if you go up in the recording archive, I'm sure, and just search on talent mobility, you'll definitely find some there. There was another panel that also touched on talent. So I wanted to highlight these four folks from Ford, VNS Health, Waste Management, and BMO as well. And I wanted to call out one comment that Melissa Thompson made. She said that high performance organizations now have an always on EVP, and that you need to be regularly updating your employee value prop. Whereas pre-pandemic, many organizations might have reasonably adjusted their EVP only every 5 or 7 years. Maybe marketing would get together with HR and look at the EVP and make some adjustments out on the website and elsewhere where that's sort of documented and put out there for both internal audience and external. But Melissa's point is now the change is happening so fast. There are so many things going on that you really need to look at your EVP as being always on, always being adjusted on, say, a monthly basis, if not just continuously. I thought that was a really profound, I hadn't heard that phrase before, and I thought that was a really profound point that she made as part of this panel. All right, also on the topic of EVP and employee experience, your people experience, this is another key takeaway that we wanted to share with you today from the conference. We had Yolanda Seals-Cofield from PwC. She shared a little bit about what they've done with a talent marketplace to increase mobility. They call it their My Plus talent marketplace. They actually use this as a benefit in recruiting when they're trying to bring people in. They talk about all the talent development that can happen in the career improvement if you join PwC. They like to focus on having a very high quality consumer level experience at the organization so that people aren't living one life at home in their personal lives and then have a low tech experience. I love the rest and renewal service that they provide their employees, which is a concierge tool for planned vacation time that even tracks any interruptions from, say, the boss or their peers. So really respecting that vacation time, that PTO in the organization. We did also ask a question of the audience for the coming year. How are you investing in the employee experience of your organization? Not surprisingly, 72% said investing more, only 5% investing less, 23% investing about the same. So great to see the ratio there, almost 3/4 saying they're investing more in people experience.
And of course, PwC took home one of our Next Practice Awards for this work. And what's very cool is they are in the middle of their journey. They talked about this as being both a cultural and a digital transformation. And so much of the work that they've done so far has still really been on the cultural side. So in the coming years, I'm excited to hear their updates of how they bring in more of that digital aspect to continue the level of personalization that they're bringing into their employees' lives.
Yeah, we are not against having repeat guests at the Next Practices Now conference in Scottsdale each year. So if there is significant change in the way you just described at PwC, I'm sure we'll get Yolanda back for that. All right, second to last takeaway that we wanted to share with you today is this issue of trust. I don't believe we had a speaker or presentation or panel that literally had trust in the title or where that was the headline. And yet I felt like this was something that both in the board meetings that we had on Monday and then throughout the conference, again, like DE&I, like AI, like culture, was sort of a through line through a lot of the sessions. And it's not something that maybe is an acute critical issue this moment, but it seems like it's growing and maybe will grow throughout this year and into 2024. And so it's trust in leadership, it's trust in workers by leaders, it's trust in policies and the individual decisions that organizations are making. It's trust in some of the processes that we use on the people side of the business, whether it's performance management, succession, equity, transparency of those processes in particular is what I would call out. It's trust for those organizations that have already had layoffs or are planning to soon. We've seen in the headlines some of the ways that some organizations have not done a good job firing people over Zoom calls and by email and other things where maybe that's not in alignment with the organization's true values or culture. You see here one of the findings from our healthy culture study. Organizations' cultures are toxic. When that's the case, they're 10 times more likely to indicate having an unsafe environment for expressing opinions or concerns is a top issue in their organization. So yet another really compelling finding from that study. So anyway, I felt like even though this wasn't one where I could highlight a specific speaker or presentation, I felt like this was a topic that was sort of bubbling under the surface last week.
Yeah, and such a macro theme too. So anything that is circulating through the air as we talk about the economy, world politics is definitely going to permeate through your employees' experience. So I think this is a great one to pull out, Tom.
Yeah, and I get this feeling, at least in the US, that politics is never ending, but is going to kind of be only on an up ramp as we go into 2024, for better or worse. One other aspect of this that maybe was the session that most hit on the issue of trust, specifically on psychological safety, at least that element of it. We did have Amy Edmondson, who called in externally to the event, Novartis Professor of Leadership and Management at Harvard Business School. I'm sure you've read some of her articles over the years in HBR and elsewhere, and she made some really great points. Learning organizations need to have a strong network of teams. Often you've got strong trust within a team, but a truly outstanding, high-performing organization is one where there's strong networking even between those teams. She said too many organizations are prone to not promoting experimentation, free expression. We just noted that last data point from our healthy culture study. And you see some of the other key findings from her work. Definitely a great friend of i4cp. We're always enlightened whenever she can speak with us, even if she had to come in virtually.
My favorite thing that she always says is, I mean, she's made a lot of her career, at least some of the things she's most well known on for this, but then she also says, guys, this should be table stakes. Like, there are so many more higher level things that we should be thinking about in our organizations. But if you don't have this, you can't talk about the other things. So I'm hoping most of our members have this as part of their culture, but this is a huge red flag if you're missing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And for more on this, in particular, tying it back to employee value proposition, see the HBR article that Zeta just put in the link there, Rethink Your EVP, that she just had published in January. All right, the last takeaway from the event was that HR people know how to have a good time. They know how to party. We had an event pretty much every night at the conference. You see a smaller event that we had there on the left. I believe that was the award ceremony. We had a big party on Tuesday with a band, sort of Beach Boys 60s themed music. I didn't know which of the photos from the party we had permission to use from some of our member or prospect organizations, so didn't want to post any of those. So I chose some with some of our happy i4cp employees. You see Zeta, who's with us on the call today, in the photo on the top right. You see the venue there, and then our two co-founders, Kevin Oakes and Jay Jamar, are there in the bottom right. We had a dress-up theme that was 60s style, so hope Kevin doesn't mind me sharing this photo out to the public here. Moment of silence doesn't apply to costumes, is what I like to say. What were your thoughts on the event, Carrie?
I had so much fun. I mean, one, I've always harbored the idea that our audience likes to dress up and they're just waiting for that excuse. And I was really blown away by so many of our attendees that came in costume for our events and just really felt into the awards after party, felt into our kind of 60s party. But also I heard some of our members reflect back to me what I really believe. This is such a special event for the i4cp team. We're a fully remote company. We have this one chance a year to come together and really get to know people. So of course we're focused on our attendees and giving them the time of their year, but it's also really special for us. I got to meet my team in person for the first time. They're brilliant, and just a huge thanks to Tom, the whole research team that shared so much of our research on stage, and so much of our marketing team, and really all parts of i4cp that puts this on each year.
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. Appreciate that. And yeah, we like to do these social events. As we mentioned earlier at the outside of the call, you know, there's the networking that happens over the lunches by topic area. There's the one-on-one networking that can happen. The workshop aspect of some of the sessions where you're working together at your tables. But it's good to let our hair down and have an event like this, dress up a little, and just have a good time as well. So with that, I wanted to, we're at the end of our hour here. I wanted to note we have already announced the dates for next year's conference in 2024, March 25th through the 28th. So like this year, it's late in the month of March. It'll be again at Scottsdale, Arizona. So those photos you just saw will again be the venue, the Fairmont Princess, which is really a great location if you've never been there before. So it's never too early to register. We often have folks that are already registered. I know we do for next year because they go to this year's conference and they register right there on site next year's conference. If that wasn't you, feel free to consider registering. And I might even ask you to put a tickler on your calendar, maybe for September, October timeframe. If you're not sure what your travel plans might be for next March, after all, it is a full year away, just put a reminder to yourself on your calendar now, so that you can be thinking about it during budget season and travel planning for the winter. Because we'd love to have everyone on this call come out and join us in Scottsdale next March.
And get your teams there. I was blown away by some of our members that brought their whole team to the conference. They had offsite events. I know that some of the i4cp folks on the call, Tom, Kevin Oakes, got pulled into those too. So it's a great way to make good use of the time and the energy, the big Houston boost and inspiration that comes out of being together.
Yeah, absolutely. Good call out. Thanks, Carrie. And thank you again, Carrie, for being my co-host on this call today. A lot of great takeaways. There were many more. We could have shared 30 things, not just 10, but we wanted to share with you all some of the key things that we thought came through last week. So thanks, everyone, for being with us. I look forward to joining with you all next week to talk about ChatGPT and all things AI. Until then, have a great rest of your week. Thanks again.